Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias, and we are back once again talking some basketball here on the back end of June. That's right, folks. NBA basketball and college basketball. This is kind of one of the few events where both fans get together and really rejoice because it's the NBA draft. The past 2 days, it's come and gone. First round and second round picks officially finalized. And now we're here to talk all about it. The NBA draft, always a fascinating subject to talk after the fact, just because you can dissect winners and losers, but quite honestly, we won't really know the results for maybe 5 years down the line. It's always some good talking points. I always say the NBA draft ultimately comes down to fit. Everybody's got talent that gets drafted, but it's all about being at the right place in the right system with the right coach and quite honestly at the right time. So it's always fun to talk, the NBA draft and, college basketball's biggest stars, some international pipeline thrown in there as well. It's always a good time. And we even got a guest on today's podcast to talk about the draft. And I feel like he's one of the perfect guys to have on the pod here today because he's the host for NBA Radio on SiriusXM. You've probably heard his voice or seen his face on a few ESPN radio guest spots. He is the good shepherd, David Shepard. David, thanks for coming on to talk some NBA today. I know you and I were talking last week and you were telling me, hey, Nick, there really is no off season. And when you got the draft, the summer league, free agency frenzy, feels like you were telling me it never really ends before we ultimately get to the season. Thanks for coming on, my man. How you doing?
My pleasure, Nick. Thanks for having me. And you're 100% right. The NBA is 24/7, 365 days a year. And, you hit on it, man. It's the draft. Look, we're all doing our best guess, right? Nobody knows. And the reality is we're not going to really know until about 5, 6 years from now how this NBA draft ultimately, unveils itself to be all-time great or an overhyped draft class. I'm leaning more towards all-time great, and it is about fit, to your point, when you get drafted.
Absolutely. While all the NBA draft stuff was going on, we had ourselves a couple of trades, and I'm glad some of these trades happened. First and foremost, the big blockbuster, Giannis Antetokounmpo to the Heat. He was in trade rumors for so long, even going back to the Bucks season when they ultimately shut him down. I'm glad that the trade actually happened, and we didn't have to talk about it all summer long. I think the Bucks. Sure, they mishandled the situation building around him the last couple of years. But I thought it was very smart for them to ultimately get the deal done now before the draft happened because, the number 10 pick in this year's draft is so valuable. What did you make of the whole Giannis trade to Miami? I thought Milwaukee's package was pretty good, given the fact that they got a lot of young assets along with Tyler Hero and, a surplus of picks. But I mean, Miami, they got to fill out this roster a little bit because they ultimately send a lot to Milwaukee.
Yeah, and obviously, the Miami Heat end up with the best player in this trade, clearly, in getting Giannis Antetokounmpo. But, to your point, it almost feels like they missed the mark because they should have made this trade at least a year ago when you could have gotten even more from Giannis Antetokounmpo, somebody that was playing at an MVP caliber level for the last few years, minus 2026, when he was just unavailable for the Bucks more often than not. And so you love the fact that Pat Riley has his superstar again. But I don't know if we're going to get the 2021 Giannis. I think we're getting an old 31-year-old. And I love Giannis. I hope that he has another few great years in the NBA. I don't love the fit with him and Bam Adebayo. And to your point, it's a roster that is, depleted at this point because of the amount of guys they had to give up, and Tyler Hero and Jaime Jaquez Jr. and Khalil Ware. But the surplus of draft picks, I believe, is going to come in handy with the Milwaukee Bucks. And, we'll see what happens with this trade. But to your point, it's the right move when you're getting rid of a franchise-altering player and superstar in Giannis Antetokounmpo before the draft, so you know what you're doing come draft time, which is why I don't understand the most recent trade. in, LaMelo Ball getting traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Naz Reid, and, a few first round draft picks, because if you're going to make a trade this significant, do it before the NBA draft when you can really know exactly what your team and roster is going to look like come October.
Yeah, exactly. That was a domino that fell this morning. And, it's very interesting. I was never a big LaMelo Ball guy to begin with, just the injury history. And Charlotte probably thought, hey, like their second half run last year, I thought was pretty legit. It was one of their
Yeah.
better defensive teams that, I've seen in some time. And, like their young pieces are really coming together. And LaMelo Ball had like his healthiest season and one of them in his entire career. He's always had a bad injury history, just can never stay on the court. So I guess that's the downside, but maybe this is just a bigger piece in what they ultimately believed in. And guys like Kobe White, guys like Con Knipple, who really flashed and he can play off the ball or with the ball in his hands. But yeah, I'm totally with you that this probably should have came before the draft. Just maybe that you could have gotten yourself a pick that you could have utilized. But with all that being said, we'll get into Charlotte's draft. I actually really liked it. But from the Timberwolves side, wow. I guess the post-game interviews every night will be fun to watch with LaMelo and Anthony Edwards. This is kind of interesting from the T-Wolves side because obviously they needed to give Anthony Edwards a legitimate, I guess, co-pilot in the backcourt.
Sure.
But the front court piece with Naz Reid going to Charlotte, Rudy Gobert only front court practically here for Minnesota. I mean, that's a big piece for the T-Wolves for sending Naz Reid, but Chris Finch has proven to do, I guess, more with less with his rosters, especially in the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like, you don't have Naz Reid anymore, right? Rudy Gobert is the individual that comes to mind in terms of being a significant front court player. Obviously, you're going to still have Jaden McDaniels. Slow-mo, aka Kyle Anderson, is going to be there. But yeah, it's they obviously re-sign Ayo Dosunmu. It's going to be an electric backcourt. Both guys drafted from the same draft class. Both guys were neck and neck for the best player for that draft class for the first couple of years. Obviously, Anthony Edwards has a significant gap at this point on LaMelo Ball, but there's something to be said about LaMelo Ball when they're building something in Charlotte, and he's been essentially the face of that franchise the last few years, and they're trading him away, right before he's entering his prime. So that's a bold move if you're Charlotte. There's got to be a good reason, and we know that reason goes way beyond talent.
Yeah. It'll be fascinating to see how it plays out, especially with, like I mentioned off the top, just Charlotte's run in the second half. I don't really think it was fluky. I think they're on their way up, but obviously LaMelo was a big part of, their scoring production and, playmaking ability as well. So I'm interested to see how it plays, but Charlotte in the East is a team that I have circled to be a potential breakout candidate for the upcoming season. Let's get into the draft, David, because this draft is absolutely stacked. I was talking with a couple of just my guys that follow basketball, and it was one of those things like, hey, this draft class compared to the draft class 2 years ago, where does Zachary Reese-Shea go in this draft if he declared this year?
Yeah.
Of course, the number one pick 2 years ago, but just a complete difference when you look at this thing top to bottom. College basketball's biggest stars, that freshman class just absolutely insane. When you put in AJ DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, Keaton Wagler. I mean, the top 8 picks in this draft were all college basketball freshmen that were just setting the world on fire. Obviously, the Wizards lucked into the number one pick this year with AJ DeBonsa. Obviously, the Wizards got much better. A much need for them having that wing piece. I guess, what do you make of, just the Wizards here? The third time they've ever had the number one overall pick. Does this team finally start to, take a step in the right direction because they've been taken here for 4 straight years?
They're certainly going to take a step forward because you can't be worse than 3 straight seasons of at least 64 losses, which has happened only no, I don't know, no other time in NBA history. So the Wizards are going to get significantly better. Obviously, signing Trae Young for a 4-year contract extension is going to pay dividends for AJ Devonta being able to play with someone that is reliable. Although the defense is questionable from Trae Young, but the guy can fill it up offensively. He's a walking bucket. Anthony Davis, we believe, is going to be a Washington Wizard. He's certainly under contract for them in 2026, 2027. So, yeah, Washington is going to take a big step forward. Obviously, you have a guy who I like a lot in Alexander Sarr. He's got a bright future. He's probably the second best player from that 2024 draft class. And then Darren Peterson, walking to a great situation with the Utah Jazz. They didn't exactly do everything they could to have their superstars on the floor, for all 48 minutes in all 82 games, and Larry Markkinen and of course, Jaren Jackson Jr. So, those are 2 all-star caliber players. Usually a number 1, number 2 overall pick doesn't go to a team with 2 all-star caliber players in their prime. And then you talk about Cameron Boozer, National Player of the Year at Duke, drafted 3rd overall. And he wins the National Player of the Year, obviously, as a freshman. That just tells you how deep and prolific and star-studded and coveted this draft class is. And then Caleb Wilson maybe have the highest ceiling of anybody in this draft. We saw what he did at North Carolina, most 20-point games in the history of that program as a freshman, and he missed the last month of the entire season. And we know who's played there: Vince Carter, Anton Jameson, James Worthy, Bob McAdoo, Tyler Hansborough, and some individual who happens to go by the name of Michael Jeffrey Jordan. And Tyler, and you talk about the great freshmen that have played there, and the greatest freshman season that you can think of from an individual perspective, at least in terms of putting the ball in the bucket, it's Caleb Wilson. So he may have the highest ceiling of anybody. If his thumb does not get hurt in the middle of the season, Hubert Davis is likely still coaching there. So very excited to see what this draft class has in store. And obviously Darius Acuff Jr., another individual that was a sensational freshman, 29 points per game in the NCAA tournament, Bob Cousy Award winner, without question the best player in the SEC, the best point guard in the nation as a freshman, and happens to be drafted 7th overall. That is how deep this draft class is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, you attack the top 4 and then number 7 overall Acuff to Sacramento. I mean, Sacramento needs the rebuild bad. They just kind of need the young star to kind of reset everything. And man, the Coach Calipari guards, whether you throw in Kentucky and Arkansas, the hit rate is pretty insane.
I agree.
I really like Kingston Flemings to Atlanta just because I'm a big Houston Cougar guy. The draft picks have been, been hitting at a high clip for the past couple of years now. They're going to guard like crazy, right? That's the Houston Cougar culture. And you're going to
except the other Hawks pick 2 years ago who went number 1 overall. He didn't exactly make waves in the NBA his first 2 years. Nick, he wasn't even the number 1 overall pick. Zachary Ricochet, he wasn't even cracking the rotation in the playoffs for the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, it's insane. But I think this guy is going to crack the rotation right away in Flemings because he can play both ways.
Yep.
The 3-level score, and I think what Atlanta was missing in the playoffs, because there was so much attention on Jalen Johnson, and it was Alexander Walker's first real postseason where he's got to go create. They just need another guy that can just go put his head down and, attract some defensive players in the painted area. Flemings will make the right play, but I think having another, versatile guard that can make things happen for you, I think will just help out everybody from what they have already there in Atlanta. So I love the pick from Atlanta's perspective. And then, of course, out of my neck of the woods here on the West Coast, the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors with Yaxel Lendeborg. Yeah. I really love the pick a lot just because he is NBA ready. I feel like from an age perspective, he's five-year college guy, 3 years at the junior college level. Played a few years at UAB before he took off at Michigan, but just a very versatile guy. The Warriors are going to have a lot of fun with this guy, and he's going to be very easy to play with. I feel like with Steph and Jimmy Butler when he comes back along with Draymond Green. Like, he's around some really good vets. I think he's already a high IQ player, but being around those guys, I think, is going to only maximize his game even more. So I love that from the Warriors' perspective. Anything else stand out to you, Shep, from the first round as a whole, maybe later down the line here, because there is still a lot of meat on the bone here.
Well, you mentioned, I do want to kind of piggyback off what you said with Kingston Flemings. I mean, he was sensational under Calvin Sampson. And, he's the only freshman in that program's history to be an All-American. And you talk about some of the freshmen that have played there. And this is before both of our time. But Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, two all-time greats. And for Kingston Flemings to have the greatest individual season as a freshman over those two guys, that's saying something. The individual that I'm very curious about is going to be Alex Caravan, somebody that was 18-2 in the NCAA tournament, the winningest player in the history of UConn men's Huskies, program, somebody that was all Big East, in his final season there. He's a winner. He's a floor spacer. He's someone that's going to be able to contribute right away. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with him going to Sacramento. But teaming up with Darius Acup Jr. is going to be fun, and then to see Zuby Ejiofor out of St. John's, the Big East Player of the Year. He's the first player in 20 years in the Big East to lead his team in points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game, blocks per game. A lot of people feel like he had this great college season, but he's going to be undersized come NBA. Well, I remember us having a similar conversation 14 years ago about an individual named Draymond Green. And Draymond Green turned himself into a first ballot Hall of Famer. So when you have that kind of a productive season in college at a high level, and you're able to get St. John's to the second weekend of an NCAA tournament for the first time this century, I don't know where the criticism is coming from when it comes to Zuby. Certainly not in the New York metropolitan area. So I got my eye on Zuby. I got my eye on Alex, two guys that did an awful lot in college basketball. I'm excited to see what those two first late round draft picks do at the next level.
Yeah, I'm with you. That you got two college basketball stars that paid their dues at that level, and now we're gonna see if it translates, right? Because those guys were stars at the college game, and we've seen guys where it doesn't necessarily translate to the NBA. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm fascinated to see how those guys go, especially Caravan for Sacramento.
Oh yeah,
just because I think they're going to need him a little bit more versus a guy like Zuby. Zuby might be able to come off the bench, maybe go through the growing pains a little bit, versus Sacramento. Like every first round pick and every draft pick I think that they have is gonna have to be playing noteworthy minutes if they want to be going in the right direction. I had some other winners just from top to bottom in this draft. Obviously OKC, everything they touch is just a masterpiece these days. But man, I just find it incredible that they just Ade Mara comes straight to their laps at 7'3" shot blocker. Obviously I think OKC is going to have this situation with Hartenstein where because the payroll is so high that they might just have to move off of him when it comes time. And I think Mara could be one of these guys that just marinates, learns behind Chet and a trustworthy vet like Hartenstein for a year or two. And then he just gets, copied and pasted right in there. So I like that a lot. And then Bennett Sturtz, I mean, his story's incredible. Division II, Northwest Missouri State, to, the Drake Bulldogs, to, the Iowa Hawkeyes. He was a winner everywhere. It's going to be tough to crack the rotation as a guard in OKC, but I feel like he could be a really good G League piece this year, and it ultimately be a potential backup point guard for OKC. Because here's the thing, Shep, the expansion draft is going to be here before you know it, and OKC is only going to be able to protect so many of those young players, right? So I could see Sturtz really coming in here, way down the line, and ultimately having an impact. May not be this year, but I think we might look back on this way down the line and be like, wow, Sturtz at 16 ends up being a saving grace for OKC when they're still trying to, compete for championships years going forward. I want to go to the second round because, of course, you're always looking for, the next, I guess, Draymond Green, Jalen Brunson, right? You're always looking for those type of guys. Again, this is kind of a college basketball junkie's dream right here, because we saw a lot of these guys playing. A lot of these guys were really good college hoops players. Isaiah Evans is the guy that stands out to me from Duke, who ends up going to the T-Wolves. This guy's just a good two-way player that hit a bunch of big shots for Duke. So I like that a lot from that perspective. Anything stand out to you from the second round, or is it just like, hey, let's let these guys go to their teams. Let's see a couple summer league reps, because again, it is a little bit hard to gauge, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and again, there's going to be so much discussion about the second round, this particular draft, because of what we just saw from a second round draft pick in Jalen Brunson, leading the New York Knicks to their first NBA championship in 53 years, having a 45-point closeout game for game number 5, something that we haven't seen from any other guard in the last 50 years, except for Michael Jordan. So there's going to be a lot of conversation with the second round, especially with how deep this draft class is. Now, the individuals that I got to keep an eye on, Emmanuel Sharp, what he was able to do, at Houston, speaking of playing for Calvin Sampson, I thought he was so significant as a two-way player. And then you talk about, another individual that had a really special college resume, and that is, of course, Braden Smith. You can make an argument he's been the best point guard in college basketball for the last 2 seasons. And then to your point about Isaiah Evans, 6'6" swingman, somebody that, really understands the assignment. I thought he was very good for Duke this year. I believe he should have been a first-round pick. And so those are the 3 names that I have in mind. Also, Henry Visar.
I'm with you.
52nd overall out of UNC. We saw how well he played off of Caleb Wilson. That's going to be someone that's going to be able to give you a lot of interior activity, but also has the ability to shoot from the outside, which is going to create a whole lot of space for his teammates and room to operate once, guys get into the paint. So this is I'm telling you, man, this is, again, this is obviously, nobody knows, we're all speculating. And we're giving our, best guesstimates here. But when it comes to the NBA draft, I believe this is going to go down as one of the top 5 draft classes in the history of the sport.
Yeah. I obviously can't wait to see, these players take the floor. I know there's the highly anticipated summer league game, right? With the Jazz and the Wizards that's already been announced. A lot of these guys are going to be compared. Obviously the whole, Darren Peterson and AJ Devonza stuff is pretty fun. Just like Boozer and Wilson, those guys were at rival schools, themselves, with Boozer being at Duke and Wilson at North Carolina. We didn't really touch too much on the Michael Brown, with his
too high, drafted too high, 6th overall, had no business being drafted over Darius A. Cuff Jr. and Kingston Fleming. But I wanted to keep it positive on your show, Nick. I didn't want to go down the negative, route where a media member is, trashing an athlete or being overly critical. But since you brought it up, he should not have been drafted 6th overall. And I'll also say this, since we're going down this road, I think Darren Peterson, from a talent perspective, is a number 1 overall pick. I think the way he handles himself when it comes to being a professional, minus the interviews that he's done the last 48 hours, which have been very sound and very polished, that is not someone that I believe has the temperament of being a number 2 overall pick. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah. Nah, I mean, I touched about it on my podcast when Kansas was in their March Madness run, but I mean, the whole Darren Peterson saga at Kansas and him sitting out in the second half in some of the games, with no explanation at all,
and missed 11 games in all too.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a mystery, and it's a mystery in that regard still. But yeah, I'm with you in both of those areas when it comes to Brown and to the Nets, and when it comes to Peterson being at number 2. But I mean, Utah, the Utah Jazz, like, this team's they're in go now mode. It's time to stop tanking. You got Peterson, you got Keontae George, like you've invested capital into Jaren Jackson, and I guess Markkanen's still a part of your plan, and you got this Ace Bailey piece, which is fascinating, and still Isaiah Collier, which I don't think he can even drink still. I mean, it's just the Utah situation is fascinating to me, but you're in the loaded Western Conference, so it's a really tough, I guess, team to evaluate, especially since they've been tanking for so long. So I don't know, but Darren Peterson, I watched him. I watched him a ton at the games that he did play at Kansas, and wow, it's like some of the shots that he hits, it's like he starts out 6 for 6 in some of these games. So the talent is certainly there.
It's there. It's off the charts, but talent only gets you so far in the NBA and only gets you so far in life.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Shep, before we close things out here, I guess just what are you looking forward to? It's the NBA offseason here. Obviously, we got free agency. Is there a team in free agency that maybe that you're keeping a close eye on? A summer league roster that you got circled just for the young players? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but
the next big domino is LeBron James, right? We know what happened to Giannis. That was going to be the big talking point in the offseason, and I'm glad that the Milwaukee Bucks, came to their, good senses and said we got to do something before the draft. But it's the LeBron James factor in year 24. Is he in LA for season number 9? Is he back in Cleveland for stint number 3? Does he team up with his buddy Steph Curry in Golden State? Does he surprise all of us and go to New York, and says, you know what, I might as well give myself the best chance in the world to actually win a championship. And New York's looking like a pretty good path right now. So that's what I'm most looking forward to in the offseason. Yeah.
Yeah. And the ball's in his court too, right? He could, choose how much money they want. And if he wants to go to a winner or, if he wants to, maximize the net worth, right? So, that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And hey, at least for me, is Jaylen Brown going to get dealt?
That's another great storyline. Absolutely.
That's the big one, right? Because Boston clearly put it out there that he was going to be in the deal for Giannis. At least that's what the reports say, right?
Right.
And now it's just all like, okay, like he said his favorite season was when he was the number 1 option and Tatum was really not on the floor, when he had an NBA championship with Tatum. And obviously Milwaukee's off the table now, and there's going to only be so many pieces, and is the package right? There's several layers to the madness here, but I feel like that might be a domino that might be falling here, over the course of the off season. And I guess we'll see how if that ultimately happens or not. But David, appreciate you, for coming on. Before we officially close it out, where could people find your work? I know you're all over NBA radio these days.
I got to do an interview right now.
But
they can follow me at Shep on Air on any social media platform. Nick, I would highly encourage you and anybody else watching this, subscribe to my YouTube channel. At David Shepard on YouTube. It covers not just basketball, but every sport. And I do my best to look at everything objectively and cover as many sports as possible. So it's not just NBA heavy. And I appreciate you having me, Nick. Very impressed with, how much you put into this and the amount of knowledge that you're able to, just spit off your dome like it's nothing when it comes to the college basketball, the NBA. It's not easy. So I appreciate the work ethic that you put forth, and just continue success in what you're doing, man. And always good talking shop with you.
Absolutely. Well, go kill that interview.
Thanks,
we'll
Nick.
be catching you on the radio airwaves. All right. So appreciate the time, and we'll be catching up down the road.
Sounds good, Nick. Have a good rest of your day, man. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. There you have it. David Shepard, representing NBA radio on SiriusXM, does a couple ESPN radio guest spots. Sharp basketball mind. This guy. Hey, I appreciate the compliments and the kudos from him to me, but I mean, man, you see him like He knows his stuff. He's got tabs on the college basketball game as much as he's watching the NBA on a nightly basis. And hey, that's what we're here to bring. We want other perspectives, and with the NBA draft happening, it's obviously one of the big events in the NBA offseason that happens, just because it's young talent that comes in, and it ultimately could change franchises for the better or the worse. So, hey, NBA draft, always a good time, always good to talk about it, especially with the sharp mind like David Shepard. So appreciate his time and appreciate him for coming on. As always, like, comment, subscribe. We got more college basketball, more college football content coming your way. Once again, I'm your host, Nick Urias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.